So guys, I want to do another tough story today, and I know like this is a bit of a repost. So I want to talk about the time that was like forced to run track in high school and middle school. And I did grow up at a very different time. So like during this time, like a lot of parents really believed in that, like sports look good on a college resume. Also, I was misdiagnosed with autism. So, one of the things that I kind of grew up with was like the war against autism. And part of that was just being forced to do after school activities and other things like that. So, that's always not good because, we don't want to hear nonstop, oh, well, this is for your autism. It's for this, for that, for this, for that type of thing. And I also didn't like it because I know like sometimes my parents would mention it's not healthy, but, I weighed less than 100 pounds. So, that's also not healthy too, is if you have a kid that's less than 100 pounds and they're running like a couple miles during the day. So, I was not really a big fan of running track or being forced to run track. And like I've said before, that, attitudes have changed. Now, like, there's kids who are good with video games. There are kids who are good with social media. So, obviously, if you have a kid who's good at that and it's something positive and constructive, a parent should really just say, screw the sports. You're gonna really do that. Maybe take some business classes or other classes that can really help you out, really. And then the other thing, like I've said, is that colleges don't care if sports are on a college resume, unless you are winning trophies and championships, and then they can use you for their teams and make money off of you. But this whole type of, what, sports is God, really, that's an old school level of thinking, really, and I also have talked to coaches, and I've had friends who are coaches, and they also preach that philosophy, like the whole entire forcing children or intimidating children to do sports, or being like, what, no TV and video games for 3 or 4 months, if you don't join the track team, that stuff, is not it's not good. So, I did track in middle school, and it really wasn't that bad of an experience. I really liked my coaches. The coach's wife, she made some really good cookies. It was a really, really great experience. And, there was a lot of problems that happened in high school that, I wasn't the most mature kid. So, I was always like fooling around, just being like Dave Chappelle, just telling inappropriate jokes. I got kicked off the first year of track because of that. And I remember like how it was a bad situation because I was making inappropriate jokes. Other people were making inappropriate jokes. One time I told a bunch of people to wait up. I need to go to the locker room, get my backpack, and drop it off in my house. And then people didn't wait up for me. So I was like waiting around the high school because I couldn't easily just run and catch up with these guys because they were really, really fast, and I would have got myself more lost. And I was also bragging about what, I'm gonna go home and watch adult videos and all that. So it was one of those things too, because I did a bunch of lying and joking around, that my story didn't come out, which was that I was expecting people to wait up for me, but they ran off ahead without me. But also, when I was like lying about, okay, well, I want to go home and watch porn and whatever, that's kind of like what people believed, really. So I got myself in trouble with that. But what happened was, a few months after that, what happened was that there was a kid in the track team who was a really good runner, and there was a rumor about him. And the rumor was that he was going on the track team, and one day they had a run. And what happened was is that he told everybody that he actually cut a run short to go home and have sex with his girlfriend. And there were stories about, whether it was consensual or not. That the mother of this girl was looking into it and being like, okay, this guy was over at my house, that's kind of like trespassing, or maybe it wasn't consensual because unfortunately sometimes when things like this happen, this is why you shouldn't have sex at a young age, is that sometimes you can have parents that lie, or parents that turn that into a trespassing thing because they're not happy that their daughters are not virgins anymore. And then the other side of it is that there are people who will have consensual sex and then lie and change their mind to get out of trouble. And then also too that when you are having sex at somebody's house at a young age, if it's you and the girl, or you and the other person are underage, parent walks in, they're like, okay, is that somebody raping my daughter? Grab a shotgun, you're dead, really. So that's why you don't do that stuff. But he was bragging about that. That was the story that I heard. My family and other people's families were close to all the other runners and all the other families running track. So the kid got kicked off the track team because my dad really pushed for it. Because he was kind of like saying, well, Byron got kicked off. He wasn't the best runner. So now this kid who was one of the best runners, who was talking about, going off to have sex and in front of a bunch of like kids from the age of 14 all the way to 18, he's not kicked off the track team. The coach is okay with it, though. That's not going to fly, really. So I appreciate my father for doing that, but I also goes mad at him because I know, like, when I actually found out this story from a few of my friends in high school because my dad was like talking a little bit about it. I said, Dad, since everybody's talking about it, what's going on? He's like, no, this is none of your business. So I was kind of like saying, what the fuck, in my head, what? You're knowing business of high schoolers and you want me to stay out of it, but other high schoolers and everybody else kind of knows it, So, that type of thing where my dad was just being Mr. Hank Hill, really, debauchery, if everybody knows the story, debauchery, I don't care if my son doesn't know or whatever, really, so, but I also appreciate it because I remember my dad kind of saying, focus on you, really. And yeah, I got kicked off the track team for a couple of months because of bad behavior. And yeah, I really needed to focus on that. Yeah, but I also never liked running track because I remember, one thing that our coach would do was that he would take all the kids that were special needs and he would have them run a relay race. So one lap around the track, you pass a baton and other things like that. And you'd watch like the kids kind of mess it up, really. And then you kind of be laughing at all the kids who were special needs. There was another time where, a bunch of girls left the track team because there's a bunch of sexual harassment jokes. I remember one of my friends was saying, do girls masturbate with 3 fingers, and a bunch of other sex jokes. And I also remember, another time, there's always seemed to be every single year, there was kind of a special needs kid that always brought a lot of attention to themselves. So there was always kind of that kid was almost kind of like the joke kid of the group. They were kind of like the Gomer Pyle, Private Pyle of Full Metal Jacket. They were just kind of like the joke kid. So it was never really, really good. And also, I've said that, I remember, whenever I ran, I always had, clicking sounds at the top of my head. I always remember, my jaw, hurting really, really badly. And I always remember, how it just wasn't a good experience. It was something that my parents really forced upon me. I remember, when I graduated high school, my parents were concerned that I didn't join the track team in college. And I was, happy that, after I graduated high school, I was like, yes, I don't have to run this fucking sport ever again, really. And I remember, when I was working at a job with a lot of workplace bullying and violence, my parents were suggesting that, I should go on runs and walks and get all that energy out of me. And I remember doing that one day. Then I remember taking my track shoes and throwing them in the trash because I was saying, I'm not a runner. That's not me. I'll never run again in my life, really. Because, it's one of those things that, sometimes that happens, really, when you have parents that really just feel like, okay, you know what, you don't like running, you don't like doing sports, but I'm going to force it on you, or I'm going to intimidate you, or I think it's good for your health, or I think it's good for your mental health, and it's actually just causing more problems. You never really get to know your kid, really. And, again, it just set me up to get bullied a lot by a lot of kids on the track team. Honestly, the things that I'm describing, as far as my coach goes with taking advantage of kids with mental health issues, or, my situation of discrimination where it's okay, you're treated differently than somebody else, really, who is doing the same type of inappropriate talk, really. That says something. But just to be but also, as I said, if you're running, you have clicking sounds in your head. If your coach is saying something your body seems unaligned, so maybe you need some surgery. Your jaw is hurting. You weigh less than 100 pounds and you're running track and you're supposed to run miles a day. Again, my parents being really, really strict, that I never showered when I came home. And I developed today varus color or some skin blots because I always remember my dad just banging really, really hard on the bathroom door So I never came home and showered after track, and that kind of gave me, some skin infection because I grew up in a household of, if people assume that you're showering more than 5 minutes, they assume that you're playing with your penis, wasting water, So that was that really. And I remember like how, and I'll say this that sometimes one of the reasons why I stopped talking to my dad when I was in college, and I was also in after college, was that because I was kind of like remembering high school track and other things where I kind of felt forced, or like my dad used to say this when I first started college, why aren't you joining the track team? You're a good runner, you won trophies, and that's a bunch of bullshit. I never won a trophy. I was always the last place kid. A lot of people were surprised that I'm mixed race, but a lot of people consider me black in Guilford, Connecticut. So they're like saying, how can this black man always come in last place? That's not that's just not that's a norm that's not normal because black people are good runners. So to go from all that really to being expected, and that's one of the reasons why I don't talk, is because I don't want to feel forced into, okay, my parents think I'm good at running, so I'm supposed to be, I'm supposed to, it's 30 degrees outside, I'm supposed to be running up and down Dixwell Avenue like a jackass, because my parents think that I'm a runner, or other things like that. So sometimes when we force things on our kids, we don't get to know our kids. But also, like I've said many many times, that honestly, sports are pointless. Unless you are doing so good at sports that it looks good on a college resume, and then they can be like, okay, now since you're winning trophies, you're going to win trophies for our school. That's the only way sports mean something, in high school or joining a team, really. But also, the other thing that I will say is that extracurricular activities. I know a lot of people disagree with me. As I said, they don't matter. They do not matter unless you're actually winning something, or if you're into theater and then you're going to college for theater, or you're learning computer science or something like that, and then you're going to college for that. Like, if it's to get you a leg up, that's good. But if it's just running for the sake of running, that's just stupid. So I definitely did not like sports and other things like being really forced upon me. And definitely too, like, when there were stories of sexual harassment and there were stories of inappropriate things happening on the track team, it's not good when you don't have that relationship, because if you're always forcing your kids to do things, if you're always just like, you do this, you do that, I understand your body, I understand you, so you actually want to do it. When you're saying you don't want to, it creates a cycle of, why should I approach my family about anything if it always feels forced, or if it always feels like they're doing mental gymnastics by saying no, you actually like it when you say you don't like it. That's just not how you do things. And then the other thing too is that I remember, like, my senior year of high school, there was a decision, which was that, okay, my parents' rule was that if you were a senior in high school, it was your choice to decide whether or not if you wanted to do sports or other things. And I said no. My parents said no, you are doing it. And I was like, saying what the fuck, really, because that wasn't, my brother never got that choice, really. But I understand things are different. But like I said before, and I said it again, I always it further just said to me, what, I can't deal with my family. I can't be around my family because, what, if I kind of did that, I'm in my 30s now. I can imagine myself being a runner. I can imagine myself, settling down, having a family. I can imagine myself, maybe being a dog owner. I can imagine myself, possibly having a homosexual relationship or a bisexual relationship, because there was a point where some of my relatives assumed that I was gay or bisexual when I'm not really. So, or some of my relatives want me to date a black woman, really, black my genes, type of thing, really. So all these things. So, that's one of the reasons why, I stepped away, because I was kind of like, no, I'm not. Byron is Byron. Byron has to figure out what Byron wants. Byron doesn't like it when people say, okay, you know what, Byron's good at astronomy, so I'm going to move down to Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm going to be, being screamed at by a bunch of scientists who expect me to know astrophysics and other things like that. So the point of it is, when we force things upon our kids, we don't get to know them. And then also, too, as I said before, and I'll say it again, that, this whole overemphasis of sports and all that stuff, that shit that's just that's unnecessary. Sports to me are unnecessary unless you have somebody who has a lot of talent and potential. If you have a kid and you know what, they want to do track and sport and field, and they're always coming in last place, or they're like coming in 50th place, you might want to tell them, okay, you suck, why are you here, why are you wasting your time, you're not doing anything. And then there's actually some track teams that'll be like, okay, we only can do 25 players, so the rest of you guys who are stinking up the rear, you guys go, because it's we can't like have a little city or whatever, so that's all I gotta say about it. It wasn't a good experience. And then also too, the other thing that I'll say is that when you do something like say, oh well, you're autistic, this is to put you in a social situation, that's very just mean and undermining. My parents are older, so if I said something like, oh well, you know what, we gotta put you in an old folks home, or you consider me black when I'm mixed race, we gotta give you some political correctness classes because you gotta assume that not every brown person's a black man. That comes off as undermining and everything's like that. So I'm definitely like proud of what I have to say to you and say to you parents and say to other people, that, when it comes to sports, I think sometimes there's people who overemphasize that it's helpful, but sometimes it's just not helpful, and sometimes that's not what your kid wants to do, and sometimes you got to listen to that because ultimately you hurt long-term relationships. If you always force things on kids, if you're always like, I understand how your brain works, and your brain likes sports, when a kid's saying no, when the kid comes in last place, when the kid's being bullied, when the kid is receiving racial discrimination, mental health discrimination, when you're on a track team where there is a history of sexual harassment, other things like that, and you overlook all those things, it says to a kid, well, I can't really trust you because you're going to put things on me that I don't like to do. It doesn't help me long term, so why should I come back to you? You may make a more independent kid that way, and that's kind of what happened with me when I went to college. So yeah, that's what I gotta say about that. I would never force sports upon my kid unless they have a lot of potential, and then I had a conversation with them by saying, you know what, this is good for you to pursue because you're a really fast runner, a really good baseball player. What you would rather, join the Major League Baseball, get a couple good contracts, retire early. That's a better path than what I have as a job right now. Really, that's the only time I would kind of really do that. But otherwise, I would say, okay, if you're average or you kind of suck really, and you're not really, and your heart isn't into it, I don't care if you play or not really because it's a waste of time.